I am reluctant to do two videos in one day, but the fact is I'm sitting here in my study, so I can do this one fairly quickly. If you do too many videos, you end up becoming a bore. Don't hang around until you're a bore. Get going before that happens. But look at Trump, he's gone. But he couldn't be boring if you tried. But I watched a great video from Thomas Sheridan just now, and he's talking. One of the things he's talking about is how so many Irishmen are utterly, utterly pathetic. I remember talking to a guy of 21 who was a big rugby player, and then something kicked off in the shop, and he just went and hid. And he pleaded with me. He said, please don't cause a scene here. I said to him, here's a deal for you. You never speak to me again. I said, you see me, you walk past me because I'll be walking past you, okay? I said, there's a deal for you. But I don't mean it. I said, that's how I mean it. Now get out of my face. I will measure my words carefully with what I'm going to describe next. About 5 years ago, there were some Irish people. They were 100% Irish. As Irish as you and me. But I think they decided to have a little holiday, shall we say, on the West Pier in Howth. And my attitude to any person is a predominantly pagan one. You keep out of my face, I keep out of yours. I don't care who you are, where you come from, what skin colour you are, what background you are. I really, genuinely don't care. But don't get into my face. And alas, they did get into my face. So, there were two women. There were two vehicles on the West Pier in Howth from these 100% Irish people, as Irish as you and me and my parents. And they approached me, and I gave them a response which was noted by all of the nice, polite normies sitting outside the Chichi restaurant. I don't want to get doxed or nixed from YouTube or zucked, so I won't give the exact wording that I used, but the two women responded by calling me a homosexual and talking about my earrings and the nail varnish that I had, and I explained to them why the two of them made me glad to be a homosexual. I explained it in quite explicit terms. And then one of their husbands came out of one of the vehicles, and he would have been half as wide as me and head and shoulders below. So I roared at him and ran straight towards him, and he ran into the vehicle and slammed the door. I turned around to those women and I said, now, I live around here. I'm living around here a lot longer than you. I said, and I'm going to do my business here every day, and nobody's going to get in the way of me. I said, so see this as a lesson. So they continued. The two of them were actually laughing throughout it. Actually, so was I, because it was very funny. I have to admit, it was. The whole encounter was very funny. About an hour and a half later, I got a call from the guards in Howth. And I said to myself, uh-oh. Christian, they said, what happened? I said, you go first. And they said, those particular people have been causing a lot of trouble down there, and they've been there for several days, but they said, we kept calling down to them to warn them, and they were quite defiant, and they just kept going on with what they were doing. I said, what's the upshot? They've gone. The guard said, they've all gone. Oh, well, I said, I said, I can't speculate. They said, we can't speculate either. No, I said, neither can I, no. But certainly, they said, in relation to kind of any problems that might have arisen previously, it seems that something caused them to go quite quickly. I said, Jesus, who knows? And the theme of this video is Be Wasp. And the Jimmy Dore show, which is an excellent American alt show. I don't agree with everything Jimmy Dore comes out with. He's still a little bit kind of old-fashioned lefty, supporter of the unions kind of thing. But he's accurate and he's fair. And it's also his show. He sets the agenda, and his wife, Steph Zamorano, sets the agenda with him. And they are even-handed and they're fair. And they're objective, and they're always trying to be as honest as they can. So, he's now beating up on Biden. So, cool. But Jimmy Dore has a good saying. The way the system works is, it's like a spider's web. It catches the flies and the wasps get through. Well, there you go. There you go, the wasps get through. In Ireland, we have a cancer at the moment called the NGOs. Now, if you have cancer, you can have an accelerant to the cancer, or you can have something that suppresses it. So our cancer in Ireland is the NGOs, and what's accelerating it? The mainstream media. So, for example, you might have lung cancer, and then taking 40 Red Marlboro a day is going to accelerate that. Possibly. Or drinking a bottle of whiskey. If you've cirrhosis of the liver, that's going to accelerate the cancer. So the cancer, the cancer stands separately from the accelerant. So in Ireland, we have a cancer. It's the NGOs, and it's a very malignant cancer, and it's growing day by day, and it's destroying this country. And the accelerant of the NGOs is the crooked, lying mainstream media. But the problem with the NGOs is that they are bedeviled with people who are lazy and incompetent. Absolutely, it's the pestilence of the NGOs. It's the pestilence of the NGOs. Somebody, I won't say who, took a court case against the state some years ago. And that person brought the action against the minister and against the state, Ireland, and the Attorney General, but also included an NGO in as one of the primary defendants. And in the statement of claim, I have this from a good source, that particular plaintiff said that the NGO was effectively operating for the state so that the court should consider the NGO to be part of the state. The NGO put up a very strong defence to this and brought a motion, an early motion in the High Court to be excluded from the case because they said we're obviously separate from the state because we're a private limited company. And the person said, well, what's your function? Are you working for the state? Are you promoting a state agenda? Who's promoting who here? Who's behind this? And the judge found that on the legality that they were a private entity, so he allowed them to be excused from the litigation. So then that particular plaintiff appealed it to the Court of Appeal, and the same arguments were ventilated in the Court of Appeal, but in more detail and possibly transcribed, was the exact role that this NGO was playing in promoting an agenda. But the NGO succeeded in the Court of Appeal in also getting excluded from the proceedings. A year later, the NGO then wrote to the plaintiff and said, we wish to know what's going on in this court case. The plaintiff wrote back to them via their solicitor and said, you applied to be excluded from the case. You won in the High Court, you won in the Court of Appeal. Now you want to be made party to this. Do you want to go to the Supreme Court over it? The NGO backed down. Be a wasp. George Orwell wrote 1984, and in 1984 there are three distinct social classes: the inner party, the outer party, and the proles, who are the lowest class. The proles are the freest class, actually. That's the crowd to hang out with. Other than that, go for the inner party, but my goodness, don't go for the outer party. The outer party are the ones who the state wedded itself to. They have the lowest standard of living relatively, because if you read between the lines in 1984, that withholding of resources and that guilt trip and that rationing, it only applied to the outer party. It didn't actually apply to the proles. And the inner party got anything they wanted. So you have to ask, who's the inner party, who's the outer party, who's the NGOs? Well, something significant in 1984 was that you didn't really know who was calling the shots. That's the way they wanted it. You didn't know who was calling the shots. But how can NGOs be held accountable? Always remember this. The decisions in this country are made exclusively by the Oireachtas. They're made by the Dáil and they're made by the Seanad. That's a constitutional thing. There's not going to be any boundaries or any breaching of those boundaries. So the way you get an NGO is ultimately by taking them into the High Court. And if that doesn't work, then you chase the minister into the Dáil. It works. It's crude. It doesn't get into the Irish Times or the RTE, but it works. So the idea that the NGOs are completely unaccountable and the idea that the politicians are allowed to wash their hands of this, no, that's not the case. But it's just what you're not being told. Psychopaths are devious, but they're also incompetent. I've said that many, 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 many times, and that's the truth. Thomas makes a point about COVID-19 that it's the bad boy down the road who the teenage girl is smitten with. Absolute, that's such a brilliant comparison. It's absolutely brilliant. You know, you're not going, like, the more that you try to wake people up, the more that they get enticed by RTE and the Irish Times and Holohan and Harris and all of these monsters. Let them go. Thomas says something that I'm aware of as well. We're not going to be going back to the old normal. This is something that even us out here may find difficult to reconcile to. Frankly, I'm not entirely happy with it, but I'm aware I've reconciled myself to it. I reconciled myself to it this time last year because I saw that what was going on was so profound and so unprecedented that this was no short thing. You know, the lockdown, the restrictions, the 5 kilometre thing, that was so profound and so unprecedented in the history of this country, let alone this republic, that I said, this is not 3 weeks to flatten the curve. And you look back at what I've said back then. I've said, you know, there's a shift taking place here. In 1984, the inner party didn't care about the proles, so long as the proles looked after themselves and didn't cause any trouble. This maps out in the way that I approach masks. I am not looking for trouble, and I'm not looking to evangelicize. I have previous videos in which I say the Irish middle class deserve everything they get. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. More than ever, the Irish middle class deserve absolutely everything they get, but I don't. So I'm not going, I'm going to make sure that it's okay for me. I'm going to make sure that it's okay for me. The Irish middle class do deserve everything they get. Look at Lacala DND, actually. That's an NGO. That they're going to fight the far right. They don't say how they're going to fight it or who they're going to name. But the money's flowing in anyway, So it's another one, I think it's called Uplift. That's another one. It's an identical NGO. They're absolutely identical. And when Lacala DND appeared like another tumour late last year, one of the primary photographs they had was of a woman dressed in a burqa with the Palestinian flag. Well, that's going to really, go down well in the Israeli embassy. So I noticed, because they blocked me, but, I'm able to watch what they're doing anyway. I noticed that Lacala DND yesterday or 2 days ago was celebrating being included in a Holocaust memorial. They shouldn't have been included. They should not have been included in that. They've no place supporting Jewish issues like the Holocaust. They've no place in that. It's only because they realised that they'd gone wrong in their incompetence and laziness. They did what any good Irish trot does, and they waved the Palestinian flag, and a lot of people took offence from that. And then the question arose of whether or not you are willing, or whether or not you should be getting funding, given that you are supporting an organisation that wants the destruction of a republic, Israel, that is recognised by Ireland. Israel has an embassy here, we have an embassy there. So Israel is a legitimate country in the eyes of the Irish state. Yet Lacala DND is promoting and continuing today to promote the Palestinians who are, and in particularly people who are calling for the destruction of Israel. How do you marry that one? How do you marry that one? So, I'm not worried, personally. Just speaking for myself, I'm not worried. These are ridiculous, lazy, shambolic individuals you're dealing with. Thomas says, our government, likes a Simon Harris and Stephen Donnelly, these freaks, are like teenage girls wedded to Neffet and Tony Holan and all these ones. And, and so are the mainstream media. They don't ask any questions. But must remember something. The Irish middle class deserve whatever they get. They deserve it with bells on and flames coming out the top and a little umbrella and sprinkles. They did. Oh, wow, they deserve it. They deserve whatever they get. But the reality is, in the Howth Peninsula at the moment, which is one of the most salubrious parts of Dublin, there are 70 houses for sale. The majority of those have been for sale for 2.5 to 3 years. No one's buying, right? So you Irish middle-class normies who follow the Fine Gael line of imagining that having that house that you live in is an asset. It's not an asset, it's a liability. It's not making money for you, it's a liability, all right? The value of your house is the next amount that somebody's willing to pay for it. It's not what they say in the Irish Times. And there's a very nice dwelling in Ranelagh, close to close to sushi bars and close to wine bars and bistros. Well, they're all closed, aren't they? They're not going to be reopening because they're private sector businesses that have been absolutely hammered in the past year. They're not reopening. So who's going to be buying these properties? Well, there's 70 to go. I mean, if I had the money, I'd buy them in Howth. If I had the money, I'd buy them. But they're still, the normies and these ones who own these houses in Howth. They're still listening to the Irish Times. That's great. Well, I mean, you keep listening and you keep holding out, not selling. That's cool. You keep holding out there. Big round of applause. Bula Busmore. Big round of applause to you. Obviously, you have the money to hold on to this lemon of a house that nobody wants to buy. I mean, there's an unfinished estate up near the summit. We all objected to it before it was built. Every single one of us jumped up and down about that, but they went ahead and built it. Half the houses in it, these big Mac mansions, huge Mac mansions, and the grounds are the size of a goddamn postage stamp. Half the houses haven't been sold, and the rest of the estate hasn't been finished. Oh yeah, they'll be getting around to doing that tomorrow, I'm sure, yeah. This gets on to the thing. You can be as normie as you want to. You can watch as much RTE as you want to. You can subscribe to the Irish Times as much as you want to. You can sign up for these NGOs as much as you want to. But when you can't eat and when you have no money in the bank, how cool is that going to be? Bill Clinton, in 1992, ran an excellent campaign, actually. He ran it on the slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." It is, yes, it is the economy, stupid. We're dealing with psychopaths, folks. We're dealing with psychopaths. They don't think in the long term. Hitler did not think in the long term. Yet in 1940, everybody thought he was going to demolish Europe. How did that? Well, he did demolish Europe. And like psychopaths, they do cause terrible destruction. They fail. They collapse in the end, but they cause terrible destruction. And Hitler caused terrible destruction. But the crash of the economy, it hasn't come yet because it's been kept on life support with the PUP payments and all the rest of it. But that can't go on. The big boys, the people who are calling the shots, are eventually going to pull the rug here. And when that happens, then, Dermot and Karen with their house in Ranelagh and all the rest of these ones. People say I'm talking about Ray and Maura. Ray and Maura are in their 70s. They've paid off their mortgage. Ray and Maura got onto the property ladder when it was still a property ladder you'd want to get onto. That's gone now. You can't get a mortgage now. But Ray and Maura's kids are Dermot and Karen, and Dermot and Karen are the dead weight that's going to bring Ray and Maura down, because Ray and Maura helped Dermot and Karen underwrite their mortgage on the house in Ranelagh. Ray and Maura live in Temple Ogue, at Farnham. But it's Dermot and Karen who are my age, 47 or thereabouts, with their kids, Jack and Sophie and the Labradoodle. They're the ones who are in trouble. So this is a domino thing. This is a cancerous thing. It spreads. It's like, it's like an electric shock. You cannot cut off the current. So Ray and Maura underwrote the mortgage for Dermot and Karen on the Dermot's web design thing. I don't know how that's going. And Karen was a dental nurse. Or no, Karen was the supervisor in a hotel. How's the hotels going? Build back better. The new normal, huh? Should be good. Should be good. Should be good. So psychopaths are devious, and they are incompetent. And what has happened has been that normie glut, who are still in the trance of RTE in the Irish Times, have been led down the road by the bad boy. Let them go. In the same way that you have to let go of the notion of going back to the old normal, by which I mean February 2020. I went away on a holiday for 12 nights in February 2020. February into March, I went down to the Mulranny Park Hotel. And for the rest of my life, I will be so glad that I got that done, that I went to that lovely Irish hotel with the lovely people, the staff, the other customers who came there. I went for a walk along the old railway line. I took photos. It was freezing cold. One night I went out of the hotel. It was about 3 a.m. And the silence at the front step of the hotel, looking over Clew Bay with Lewisburg, where my mother was born in April of 1930. Looking over at Lewisburg, the handful of lights, which are 50 miles away across Clew Bay. That night was more silent than I ever remember anywhere in my life. And there wasn't the sound of the wind or the sea or animals or people or traffic. There was nothing that night. And I went away for those 12 days. I went on my own. I got the train down to Westport and I got a bus over from Westport to Mulranny, and then I had to get a taxi home because there's rubbish public transport beyond Westport. Although they should reopen the old Westport to Achill line because it ran behind the hotel. And I realise in retrospect that that was the final days before it all collapsed, before it all was stolen. I walked around the hotel, I hugged people, I chatted with people, I spoke into their faces, they spoke into mine. I swam in the hotel pool, I had dinner in the restaurant, I had breakfast in the restaurant. And I went for 12 nights, and I remember before I booked it, one of the staff said, "Do you think it's too long?" No, I said, "I think I'll enjoy it." And for many years before this, I had a hunch that something was coming. I don't know what that something was, but there was something on my mind. I called it, and actually, do you know, I'm uncomfortable saying this in all earnestness, I called it the war. That's what I called it in my head, and here we have it. And the idea, also, it's another normie addiction, that it's going to go back to normal quite soon. It's not, I'm afraid. It's going to get worse, I think. I think it's going to get far worse. So we have monsters like Varadkar talking about vaccine passports. Then we have these other ones. I forget. There's one other blade. I forget his name. Saying, that the freedoms to go to hotels and restaurants and that'll be open for people who've been vaccinated. Well, let's bring it on, guys. Yeah, bring that one on. Inequality before the law, huh? But for the rest of my life, I see those 12 days I spent in the Mulranny Park Hotel as being... it was the last chance to get in. The hotel closed about a week afterwards. There was no masks, no people wearing visors, no plastic yokes, no social distancing. I said in a previous video, I met this normie woman that she'd been at a picnic area, and, a picnic area in a forest, and they had a plastic screen between, dissecting the picnic table, so that she and whoever she was with, could sit on one side and they could still be socially distanced and the people sat on the other side. She said, actually, and I thought it was very clever. I said, "You're one of the saddest people I've ever met." "Excuse me?" She said, "I would imagine you would." I said, "I would imagine you would." Well, she said, I was just saying, "I know what you're saying." I said, "I know what you're saying." I said, "And we've just had that ball in the Connemara something hotel, the Station House Hotel in Connemara, in which all of these movers and shakers broke all the laws." I said, "But no," I said, "you're celebrating the fact that there's a big piece of plastic on a picnic table in a forest." I said, "You're beyond hope. You're beyond redemption." I said, "I don't know why I'm condescending to speak to you." And I don't know. I mean, Thomas talks correctly about the fact that you shouldn't... don't try to convert them. But I just think my bluntness got to her because she was one of these polite bridge-type women from Sutton. Well, she said, "I suppose, you're right about the men at the Connemara Hotel." Yes, I said, "I suppose I am as well, yeah." She said, "But what can you do?" I said, "You can not wear a mask." I said, "That's what you can do." "Oh, but she said it's the law." I said, "Have you read it? Have you read the law?" "Well, no, I haven't." "Okay, well," I said, "there you are quoting the law to me." I said, "And you haven't read it." "Have you read it?" she said. I said, "Why?" I said, "I'm not quoting it." And I honestly think that my genuine irritation at her, the way that she had said that this plastic yoke separating a picnic table in a goddamn forest, I thought it was very good, actually. Well, you don't deserve civil liberties, and I'd send you over to China to harvest your organs. Oh, they're probably too old. All of the sherry and red wine and, the Prosecco has probably rotted them already. It's obviously rotted your brain. Oh, save us. It shocked me and it enraged me. Now, Thomas says don't get upset about it. No, I'm not getting upset. But, we were sitting outside a cafe having coffee and it was chatting. You can go to the zoo and look at the animals as they're getting into the cage. And that's the way I'd see it there. You can engage with them. It's like the time the two of them were standing, a woman in her 70s and her son, who would be my own age, were standing outside our house, and the woman said, we were having this conversation. The son was just like listening to a replay of kind of, I don't know, Neffet. And, the son wasn't human, wasn't sentient. But the woman said, I'm fed up of it all, she said, and I just wanted to go back to the way it was. And I said to her, well, I said, it will the moment enough Irish people decide it does. And she looked at me and she said, you're right.